The evening air in Los Angeles carried a sharp winter bite, the kind that slipped through torn jackets and settled deep into the bones. Near an old gas station on the edge of the city, a skinny homeless boy named Eli stood beside a flickering streetlight, rubbing his hands together for warmth. He was about 13, with messy brown hair and eyes that seemed far older than his years. Eli survived by noticing things other people ignored: small sounds, tiny changes, patterns most walked past without a second glance. That night, the ground began to tremble. A deep, thunderous roar rolled down the street like distant thunder. Eli looked up and saw them, motorcycles, 6 of them, riding in a tight formation. Chrome reflected the streetlights, leather jackets gleamed, and the unmistakable skull emblem of the Hells Angels marked their backs. People nearby stiffened. Some stepped away, others pretended not to look. Eli, however, leaned forward. As the bikes slowed near the gas station, one sound didn't fit. Beneath the growl of engines and the hiss of exhaust, Eli heard something else, soft, steady, wrong. Tick, tock, tick, tock. His heart started racing. That sound wasn't supposed to be there. One motorcycle in particular stood out, a black Harley with polished chrome pipes and a deep red stripe along the tank. The rider was big, broad-shouldered, with a thick beard and hard eyes. His name was Jack, though most people knew him only by his patch and reputation. He'd rebuilt that bike with his own hands, piece by piece. To him, it was more than a machine. It was loyalty, freedom, identity. As the group rolled past, Eli didn't think. He didn't hesitate. "I hear tick-tock on your bike," he yelled. The words cut through the noise like a blade. Jack slammed the brakes. Tires screeched. The other riders stopped instantly, hands tightening on handlebars. Conversations around the gas station died. You could feel the tension snap into place. Jack slowly turned his head and looked at the boy. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Eli swallowed. His stomach twisted with fear, but the sound echoed again in his head. "Tick, tock. I hear a ticking," Eli said, pointing with a shaking finger toward the engine. "Like a clock. It's not normal." Jack scoffed and laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Kid, I built this bike myself," he said. "There's no ticking." But as he said it, doubt flickered across his face. Jack cut the engine. Silence fell, heavy and thick. In that quiet, it became clear, faint, but undeniable. Tick, tock, tick. Jack's jaw tightened. The other bikers exchanged looks. Jack leaned down slowly, pressing his ear closer to the engine casing. The sound grew clearer with every second. His confidence wavered, replaced by something far rarer. Concern. He looked back at Eli, eyes narrowed, no longer angry, just focused. "How long have you heard sounds like that?" Jack asked. Eli shrugged softly. "All my life," he said. "Some sounds mean trouble. This one feels like it's counting down." Jack straightened up, his face unreadable. Whatever this was, it wasn't nothing, and suddenly, that homeless boy didn't look invisible anymore. Jack stayed silent for a long moment, the ticking filling the space between him and the boy like a warning no one could ignore. The other Hells Angels dismounted their bikes, boots hitting the pavement in unison. Their faces were hard, suspicious. A homeless kid yelling at one of their own wasn't something they took lightly. "Back off," one of them muttered, stepping closer to Eli. Jack raised a hand. "Wait." He crouched again, this time slower, more careful. He removed his gloves and rested his palm lightly against the engine casing. The metal vibrated under his skin. There it was again, steady, mechanical, completely out of place. Jack's mind ran through every part he'd installed, every bolt he'd tightened. Nothing should have been making that sound. "Pop the side panel," Jack said to one of the riders. A screwdriver appeared instantly. The panel came off, revealing the tight maze of metal beneath. Gas station lights reflected off polished parts, but Jack's eyes were locked on one section near the timing system. He leaned closer, his breath held. The ticking grew louder. Eli, still standing a few feet away, hugged his jacket tighter. He didn't understand engines, but he understood danger. Sounds had saved him before. Cracking ice, unstable buildings, angry footsteps behind him in dark alleys. This sound felt the same. Wrong. Urgent. Jack suddenly stiffened. "There," he said quietly. A small component had worked itself loose, barely noticeable to the eye, but moving just enough to grind against a rotating part. Every second the engine ran, it edged closer to disaster. At high speed, it could seize the engine, lock the rear wheel, and throw the rider straight into traffic. One of the bikers let out a low whistle. That would have been bad. Jack slowly sat back on his heels. For the first time in years, a cold shiver ran down his spine. He thought about the highway ahead, the speed, the trust he'd placed in his machine. Another mile, maybe less. He turned and looked at Eli. The boy flinched, expecting anger, maybe worse. Instead, Jack stood up and walked toward him, stopping just a step away. The crowd around the gas station watched, holding their breath. "You might have saved my life," Jack said. Eli blinked. "I just heard it," he replied softly. "It was loud to me." Jack reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet, but then paused. He shook his head and put it away. "Money's not what you need right now, is it?" Eli didn't answer. Jack glanced at the gas station store. "You eaten today?" Eli hesitated, then shook his head. Minutes later, Eli sat on the curb with a hot burger and fries, steam rising into the cold night air. He ate slowly, like he was afraid it might disappear. Jack sat nearby, watching his bike get temporarily secured, his thoughts heavier than the leather on his shoulders. Mechanics later confirmed it. Another ride, another minute at highway speed, and Jack wouldn't have walked away. As the engines restarted, Jack looked back at Eli one last time. "You've got a gift, kid," he said. "And gifts like that shouldn't be wasted on the streets." Eli looked up, unsure what that meant, but for the first time in a long while, the future didn't sound like ticking anymore. The motorcycles pulled away from the gas station one by one, their engines sounding cleaner, smoother, safer. The noise faded into the night, but Jack didn't leave. He stood there watching Eli finish the last of his fries, the boy's thin fingers trembling, not from fear this time, but from warmth returning to them. "What's your name?" Jack asked. "Eli," the boy replied, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You got family around here, Eli?" Eli shook his head. "Not anymore." Jack nodded slowly. He didn't push. Some answers didn't need digging. He pulled out his phone and stepped aside, making a call. His voice was low, serious, different from the rough tone he used with his crew. Within 20 minutes, a pickup truck rolled into the gas station. The driver was an older man with grease-stained hands and kind eyes, Mike, a mechanic Jack trusted more than anyone. Mike stepped out, glanced at Eli, then at Jack. "This the kid?" Mike asked. Jack nodded. "Best years I've ever met." Mike studied Eli for a second, then smiled. "You like engines, kid?" Eli shrugged. "I like how things sound when they're right." Mike chuckled. "You'd fit right in at my shop." Jack crouched in front of Eli again. "Listen carefully," he said. "I can't promise miracles, but I can promise you a roof, food, school, and a chance to learn something real. Mike runs a place where you'd be safe. You'd have to work hard." Eli's eyes widened. "You mean, I wouldn't have to sleep outside?" Jack shook his head. "Not tonight. Not anymore, if you don't want to." The boy looked down at the ground, overwhelmed. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, very quietly, "Okay." That single word hit Jack harder than the ticking ever had. The weeks that followed changed everything. Eli moved into a small room behind Mike's garage. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, clean, and quiet. At the shop, Eli listened. While others used scanners and tools, Eli stood with his eyes closed, identifying problems just by sound. A misaligned belt, a faulty bearing, a timing issue no computer flagged yet. Word spread. Soon, people came not just for repairs, but for Eli. Mechanics twice his age asked him to listen to engines. Jack visited often, watching from a distance, pride hidden behind his beard. The Hells Angels noticed too. The kid who once shouted at them from the curb was now someone they respected. Months later, at a community bike event, Jack stood beside Eli as applause broke out. A rebuilt Harley purred perfectly after Eli caught a flaw no one else heard. Jack leaned down. "Funny thing," he said. "That ticking you heard that night, it wasn't counting down my time." Eli looked up at him. "It was counting up yours." Eli smiled. For the first time in his life, the sounds around him weren't warnings anymore. They were possibilities.